The Star Empire stretched across 1,000 suns, but even its mighty ruler, Emperor Varen, could not rule his own heart. Behind the shining walls of his golden palace, he carried a pain that no one dared to speak of: his 3 daughters. They were born under strange moons during a storm that tore through the stars. When the Emperor first saw them, his proud smile faded. Their eyes were different, their skin not like his own kind, their faces marked by what others called ugly. To him, they were a reminder of a curse, one that made him believe the gods had turned against his bloodline. So he hid them. In the deepest part of the palace, beyond marble halls and golden doors, the 3 daughters lived like shadows. Lyra, the eldest, spoke softly and never looked in a mirror. Mira, the middle one, always covered her face with a silver veil. And Sarah, the youngest, dreamed of sunlight but had never seen it. They were forbidden to step outside. No one was allowed to mention their names. Even the servants walked quietly when passing their doors. But stories have a way of escaping cages. Whispers spread through the empire of the cursed princesses, too hideous for the eyes of men. Some said the emperor planned to send them to another planet. Others said he wanted them erased from memory. No one dared to ask him the truth until a human arrived. His name was Commander Ryan Hale, a diplomat from Earth. He came to negotiate peace after a long border war. Ryan was brave, but also kind, the kind of man who looked people in the eye, no matter their rank. The Emperor welcomed him with a cold smile, but behind that politeness was distrust. To Varen, humans were strange, reckless creatures from a dangerous world. But he needed Earth's technology, and Ryan came with it. During his stay, Ryan explored the Grand Palace, marble stairs that curved like rivers of light, statues of alien gods, and gardens that glowed with silver leaves. It was there, in one quiet corner of the garden, that fate played its hand. He heard soft singing. It was a sad, broken song that didn't belong in such a beautiful place. Following the sound, Ryan found a small gate half hidden behind vines. He opened it and stepped into a forgotten courtyard. There, sitting beside a fountain, were 3 girls in gray robes. Their faces were half covered, but he could see tears glistening on their cheeks. They stopped singing when they saw him, shocked, afraid. Ryan froze too, realizing he had stumbled into a place forbidden to guests. But then one of them, the youngest, whispered, "Please, don't tell anyone we are here." Her voice was trembling. He nodded slowly. "I won't," he said gently. "I'm sorry if I scared you." The eldest, Lyra, stepped forward. "You are human?" she asked, her accent sharp but curious. "Yes," he said, "from Earth." There was silence. Then a faint smile appeared under her hood. "We have read about your world. The planet of storms and oceans," Ryan smiled back. "And pizza," he added softly. For a moment the tension broke. The youngest, Sarah, giggled, a small, bright sound that filled the air like sunlight through clouds. It was the first laugh they'd shared in years. But peace never lasts in an emperor's palace. That night a servant reported what he saw, a human talking to the cursed princesses. The emperor's face turned pale with rage. "He dared to look upon them," he shouted. "He dared to touch my shame." The next morning, Ryan was summoned to the throne room. The vast hall was filled with alien nobles, soldiers, and the heavy silence of judgment. "Human," the emperor said coldly, "you have trespassed into forbidden chambers." Ryan bowed slightly. "I didn't mean any disrespect, Your Majesty. I only met 3 lonely souls who needed someone to talk to." Murmurs echoed through the room. Lonely souls? How dare a human speak of royal blood that way? The emperor's golden eyes burned. "You will never see them again," he growled. "And if you value your life, you will forget they exist." Ryan looked up, his calm voice breaking the silence. "With all respect, Your Majesty, I can't forget kindness or sadness." The emperor's rage was instant. "Guards!" But before they could take him away, a voice cried from the doorway, "Father, stop!" It was Lyra stepping into the throne room for the first time in her life. The court gasped. She removed her veil, revealing scars, yes, but also deep blue eyes shining with courage. "He has done nothing wrong," she said. "He spoke to us as equals." The emperor's jaw tightened. "You shame me before my court." Tears rolled down her cheeks. "Then let me carry that shame, Father. For once, let someone see us as more than monsters." The court froze in disbelief. No one had ever spoken to the emperor like that. Not even his generals. Ryan's voice broke the silence. "Your daughters are not monsters," he said softly. "They are the most human beings I've met in this palace." For a long, heavy moment, the emperor said nothing. Then he turned away, his voice low and sharp. "Take him to the lower cells, and if he speaks again, cut out his tongue." As the guards dragged Ryan away, the daughters cried silently. That night, Lyra, Mira, and Sarah sat by the window of their dark room. Outside, lightning split the alien sky. Lyra whispered, "He called us human. Do you think he meant it as an insult?" Mira shook her head. "No," she said softly. "He meant it as hope." And far below, in the cold prison, Ryan looked up at the same storm and whispered to himself, "I'll see them again, I promise." The thunder answered him, and the story of the Star Emperor's shame had truly begun. Days turned into weeks, but Commander Ryan Hale could not forget the 3 daughters of the Star Emperor. Even in the cold prison cell deep beneath the palace, their faces stayed in his mind, not because of beauty, but because of something else. Their sadness. The guards fed him once a day and never spoke. His cell was small, with one light that flickered like a dying star. Still, Ryan smiled whenever he remembered the youngest one, Sarah, giggling for the first time. It reminded him that even in darkness, light could live. One night, while the moon of the Empire hung red in the sky, Ryan heard a faint sound, metal scraping against stone. He turned and saw a small hole open near the wall. A soft voice whispered, "Ryan, are you awake?" It was Mira. He moved closer. "Mira? How did you—" "Quiet," she said quickly. "We don't have much time." She slid a folded piece of metal through the hole. "It's a key. Lyra made it from the old gate locks. Use it when the guards change shifts." Ryan stared at the key, shocked. "Why are you doing this?" "Because," Mira whispered, "you looked at us and didn't turn away." Her voice trembled, then faded as footsteps echoed above. The hole sealed shut. Ryan was left staring at the small silver key in his hand, his only chance of freedom. When the bells rang to mark the guard shift, Ryan unlocked the door. The lock clicked softly. He stepped into the empty hallway, his heart pounding. Every corner glowed with blue alien lights. He moved fast, silent as a ghost. At the end of the tunnel, a secret door opened, and there they were. Lyra, Mira, and Sarah, waiting in the shadows. Sarah's eyes lit up when she saw him. "You came," she whispered. "I had help," he said with a small grin. The sisters smiled for the first time together. They led him through hidden passages behind the palace walls, tunnels built centuries ago for escaping assassins. As they walked, Sarah held a lantern that glowed like a tiny sun. Ryan asked softly, "Why are you risking everything for me?" Lyra looked ahead, her tone calm but heavy. "Because your kindness woke something we thought was dead." They reached a secret chamber, an old observatory forgotten by time. Glass walls opened to the stars. The universe stretched endlessly before them. Ryan looked around in awe. "This place is beautiful." "It used to be our mother's," Mira said quietly. "She would bring us here when Father was away. She said the stars don't judge anyone's face." They sat together looking out at the galaxies. For hours they talked, about Earth, about the sea, about laughter. Sarah asked what oceans smelled like. Ryan told her about salt and rain and sand between toes. Lyra asked what love felt like. Ryan struggled to answer. It feels like... He paused, searching for words, so, like finding light in the dark. The sisters grew silent. None of them had ever been spoken to like that. But peace never stays for long in the palace of an emperor. A mechanical bird, the emperor's spy drone, landed silently on the window frame. Its eyes glowed red, recording everything. Ryan noticed it too late. The drone flew away with a sharp buzz, vanishing into the night. Lyra's face turned pale. We're discovered. Ryan stood. Then I'll surrender. I won't let them hurt you. But Mira shook her head. No, you don't understand, Ryan. If they find us together again, they'll execute you in front of the Senate. Suddenly, alarms began to sound across the palace. Guards shouted orders. The walls pulsed with red lights. Sarah grabbed Ryan's hand. This way. They ran through the hidden corridors. Ancient paintings of alien kings watched silently as they fled. The palace trembled under the sound of engines starting, the royal guard mobilizing. They reached the edge of the garden, the same place where Ryan first met them. The silver leaves shimmered under the alarm lights. Lyra stopped and turned to him. Go. They won't stop until you're gone. Ryan's voice was firm. I'm not leaving without you. You have to, she said. If you die, everything ends here. But if you live, maybe we'll have a chance later. Mira pressed something into his palm, a small chip glowing faintly. This will open the service gate to the docks. There's a ship there. Go before sunrise. Ryan's eyes met theirs one last time. I'll come back for you, he promised, and then he ran. The sisters watched from the shadows as he disappeared beyond the garden walls. When the guards arrived moments later, the Emperor himself led them. His golden armor glowed like a sun as he shouted, Find the human. He must not leave the palace alive. The search lasted all night. Ships roared over the city. The Emperor's fury shook the stars, but Ryan escaped, barely. As dawn broke, his small craft soared into the upper atmosphere, chased by laser fire. Below, the Emperor stood on his balcony, his face filled with hatred and confusion. Why would my daughters betray me? For him? He muttered. Meanwhile, in their secret room, Lyra whispered, He's free. Mira smiled faintly. For now, Sarah looked toward the sky, tears in her eyes. He promised to come back. The camera would fade on that image. 3 alien sisters standing beneath the rising suns of their world, watching a small human ship vanish among the stars. And in that moment, the universe itself seemed to pause, because something impossible had begun. Not war, not peace, but love between worlds. Far away from the shining towers of the Star Empire, a small ship drifted among broken moons. Inside it sat a man who had lost everything, Commander Ryan Hale, the human who dared to touch the Emperor's greatest secret. His ship was damaged from the chase. Alarms beeped softly and half the controls were burned, but Ryan didn't care about the danger. He only cared about the 3 alien sisters he had left behind, Lyra, Mira, and Sarah. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw them crying behind the palace walls. He had promised to return. And promises for him were sacred. On the 4th night of his exile, a strange signal appeared on his radar, a secret frequency marked with 3 soft pulses. He recognized it immediately. It was the same rhythm Sarah had tapped on his hand when they said goodbye. 3 hearts, she'd whispered back then. 1 hope. Ryan traced the signal to a cold, deserted moon. As his ship landed, clouds of silver dust rose around him. The silence of the place was almost holy. Then he heard footsteps. From behind the rocks emerged 3 cloaked figures. He froze, then his breath caught. Lyra, Mira, and Sarah stood before him. Exhausted, frightened, but alive. Sarah. He ran forward. She smiled through tears. You came back, I promised, he said simply. They had escaped the Empire using an old diplomatic vessel, helped by loyal servants who pitied them. For the first time in their lives, they were free, but also hunted. That night, they built a small fire beneath the stars. It was strange. 3 alien princesses sitting beside a human man, surrounded by ruins of an ancient world. But for them, it felt like home. Mira stared at the flames. Do you think Father will stop hunting us? Ryan shook his head. No, not until he has control again. But that doesn't mean we stop living. Sarah leaned closer. Then we live together. Her words were simple, but they carried power. Even Lyra, who had always been the most cautious, nodded slowly. If this is exile, then I choose it, she whispered. And so began their life in hiding. Weeks passed. Ryan repaired the ship piece by piece using scraps and old metal. The sisters learned to cook with earth rations, to grow small plants in recycled air, to laugh without fear of being overheard. Slowly, the palace ghosts in their hearts began to fade. One night, as Ryan fixed a broken generator, Lyra approached him. You risked everything for us, she said softly. Why? Ryan looked up, his hands covered in grease. Because no one deserves to be treated like a secret, she knelt beside him. Even if it means your death? He smiled faintly. If I die giving someone a life worth living, then it's not a waste. Lyra didn't reply, but her eyes shimmered with tears. For the first time, she understood what humans meant by love. It wasn't weakness, it was the courage to care when the universe said not to. Months later, their secret life turned into something more. They built a small shelter inside a mountain cave. The air was thin, but the view of the galaxy was endless. There were nights filled with laughter, stories of Earth's reign and dreams of peace. But fate had one more surprise. Sarah fainted one morning while planting new crops. Mira rushed to her side. Sarah, what's wrong? Her heartbeat was strong but strange. Ryan used his scanner, but when the readings appeared, he froze. The screen showed 2 heartbeats, one hers, one smaller. You're pregnant, he whispered. The words hung in the air like thunder. At first, the sisters thought it was impossible. Different species, different worlds, how could such a thing happen? But the scanner didn't lie. And within days, both Lyra and Mira showed the same signs. The impossible had become real. Ryan was speechless. This can't be. Lyra touched his hand. Life finds a way, doesn't it? Sarah smiled weakly. Maybe the stars wanted this. The reality of it shook them all. They were carrying human royal hybrids, children that should not exist. But instead of fear, something else filled the cave that night. Wonder. Mira whispered to the unborn life inside her. You will be free. You will never live in shadows like we did. Ryan stood at the cave entrance looking out at the galaxy. He didn't know what the Empire would do if they found out. But he knew one thing. He would protect them no matter the cost. Months later, their hiding place was discovered. The Emperor's spies found traces of strange energy patterns around the moon. The news reached the royal court and soon the Senate was in uproar. The cursed daughters live, one senator hissed. Not only that, said another, trembling. They carry human offspring. Shock turned to chaos. The Emperor's pride shattered. He slammed his fist against the table. They defied the law of the stars. He ordered a fleet to capture them alive. But deep inside, something inside him wavered. A small, silent voice whispering, could love create life where science says no? Back on the moon, the sisters could feel the storm coming. Ships glowed in the distant sky. Ryan looked at them and said firmly, we can run or we can stand. Lyra took his hand. We don't run anymore. Mira stood beside her. If they call our love forbidden, then let the whole galaxy see it. Sarah's eyes glowed softly. Then we fight for our family. The final shot would fade on the 4 of them, Ryan and the 3 sisters standing on a rocky cliff as the Emperor's warships approached. Through the clouds, their hearts beat together as one. And for the first time in history, love itself became an act of rebellion. The news spread across the galaxy like fire. The daughters of the Star Emperor were alive and pregnant. With a human's children. At first, no one believed it. It was a rumor too wild, too impossible. But when the royal scientists confirmed the genetic data, the entire galactic senate fell into chaos. This cannot be true, shouted one senator. Human DNA cannot bond with imperial blood, yelled another, but it was true, and the truth was dangerous. Meanwhile, on the quiet moon where they hid, Ryan Hale sat beside a small fire inside the mountain cave. The sisters were asleep, their faces calm and glowing in the light. He watched them in silence. Their bodies had changed, gentler, brighter, filled with new life. Sarah rested with her head on his arm, whispering softly in her sleep. Ryan, the stars are singing again. He smiled sadly. That's just the wind. But deep down he felt it too. Something in the air had changed. Something powerful. Something sacred. Outside, the night sky shimmered with strange lights. Not just stars, but blue waves of energy moving like gentle rivers across the horizon. The moon itself seemed to hum softly, as if nature was celebrating what the universe had just done. A miracle. 3 alien princesses, once hidden in shame, were now carrying life born from love, not power. Days passed and the children began to grow quickly. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly gold at night. Mira's heartbeat synchronized with the stars. Sarah's laughter filled the air with light particles that danced like fireflies. Ryan kept records of every change. He wanted to understand it, not as a scientist, but as a father trying to protect what he didn't fully grasp. One evening, he placed his hand on Lyra's stomach. "I can feel it." "They're strong," Lyra smiled gently. "They will be more than strong. They will be different." "Different can be dangerous," he said softly. She shook her head. "No, Ryan. Different can change everything." Far away, the Emperor sat alone in his throne room. He had stopped wearing his crown. For the first time in his long reign, he looked old. He dismissed the guards and turned to the royal scientist kneeling before him. "Is it true?" "Yes, my Emperor," the scientist whispered. "Your daughters carry human life. The children are developing faster than normal. Their cells are perfect." The Emperor closed his eyes. Perfect. That word pierced his heart. For years he had hidden his daughters because they were not perfect enough, and now because of the one creature he had called inferior. They had become the center of the universe's most perfect creation. He stood up slowly. "Find them. Bring them home." The scientist hesitated. "Alive?" The Emperor's voice trembled. "Alive." Back on the moon, the family had no idea that a fleet was already on its way. Ryan spent his days building a small shelter of metal and stone. The sisters helped him, their movements slower but graceful. He had never felt such peace before. At night, they gathered by the fire and spoke about their dreams. Sarah wanted to see Earth's oceans. Mira wished to show their children the stars without fear. Lyra simply wanted to hold Ryan's hand under the sun without hiding. "Someday," Ryan promised, "we'll walk in the open. No walls, no chains, just sky." He didn't know that fate was listening. When the birth pains began, the entire moon shook. It wasn't normal. The air vibrated, and blue lightning crawled across the ground. The stars pulsed brighter, like living hearts beating in rhythm with the screams of creation. Ryan rushed to them. "Hold on, just breathe," Sarah cried out, clutching his hand. Mira fell to her knees, tears mixing with light as her body glowed brighter. Lyra screamed last, her voice echoing through the valley, and then silence. The storm stopped. The air went still. In that silence came a soft cry, a baby's cry. Then another. Then a third. Ryan lifted his eyes, tears streaming down his face. 3 children lay in their mother's arms, each one shining faintly with starlight. Their skin shimmered silver blue, their eyes bright like small galaxies. The sisters laughed and cried at the same time. "They're beautiful," Mira whispered. "No," Ryan said softly, voice breaking. "They're miracles." At that same moment, across the galaxy, alarms rang in the Royal Observatory. Energy readings spiked higher than anything ever recorded. The scientist looked in awe. "Something's been born," he whispered. "Something new." The Emperor felt it too. His chest ached, his eyes glowing faintly as if he shared their blood. He whispered to himself, "My grandchildren." But the Senate did not see a miracle. They saw a threat. In a dark chamber, the senators gathered, voices full of fear. "If this hybrid species spreads, the balance of power will collapse. They must be destroyed before the bloodline spreads." A vote was cast. A command was sent. The Emperor's fleet, now under Senate control, was ordered to erase the moon completely. On the moon, Ryan felt the ground tremble again, but this time it wasn't nature. It was engines, warships. He looked up and saw dark shapes breaking through the clouds, lights flashing red. The sisters clutched their newborns close. "Ryan," Lyra whispered. "They found us." Ryan grabbed his blaster and took a deep breath. "Then let them come." Sarah's voice shook. "We can't fight a fleet." Ryan turned to her, fire in his eyes. "Maybe not. But I'll make them remember what humanity really means." He kissed each child's forehead, whispered something to each sister. and stepped out into the storm as the first bolts of plasma fell from the sky. Above him, in his flagship, the Emperor watched through the screen. His heart split in two. He saw his daughters holding their children. He saw the humans standing tall before his army, and he whispered, "Forgive me." The fleet paused. For a heartbeat, the universe stood still, caught between destruction and destiny, and in that pause, the miracle of love glowed brighter than every star in the Empire. The black sky above the moon burned with the light of warships. The Imperial fleet hung like a wall of death, hundreds of ships glowing red with the power of 1,000 suns. At the center of that storm sat the Star Emperor, his golden armor shining like a false god. His order was simple: erase the human, retrieve the daughters. But deep in his chest, something trembled, something he hadn't felt in decades. Doubt. On the surface below, Ryan Hale stood alone before the cave where the three sisters and their newborn children hid. The air was thick with heat, his clothes torn, his face lit by fire and determination. He could hear the distant cries of infants, the tiny sounds that had changed everything. Behind him, Lyra, Mira, and Sarah begged him to come inside. "Ryan, please," Mira whispered, tears in her eyes. "You can't fight the Emperor." He turned to them, smiling softly. "I'm not fighting him. I'm fighting what he believes." When the first ship landed, its engines melted the rocks into glass. Dozens of armored soldiers stepped out, silent, perfect, and soulless. Their helmets reflected Ryan's image, one human against an empire. "By order of His Majesty," said the lead soldier, his voice cold and metallic, "you are under arrest for treason against the Imperial bloodline." Ryan didn't move. "Tell your Emperor I want to speak to him. No tricks, no weapons, just words." The soldier raised his blaster. "You are not in a position to negotiate." Before he could fire, a sharp voice echoed across the battlefield. "Stand down." The soldiers froze. The sky shimmered, and from the flagship above, a beam of light descended, forming a bridge of gold. The Emperor himself stepped out, his cloak trailing behind him like a living flame. Every soldier knelt. Only Ryan remained standing. They faced each other in silence. Two beings from two worlds, one born of power, the other of compassion. "So," the Emperor said at last, his voice quiet but sharp, "you are the human who defied my empire." Ryan looked him in the eye. "No. I'm the man who showed your daughters what love feels like." The Emperor's golden eyes narrowed. "You dare speak of love after corrupting my bloodline?" Ryan's voice stayed calm. "If love is corruption, then your empire was already dying." The Emperor raised his sword, ancient and glowing with starlight. "You destroyed my honor. You turned my heirs into fugitives." Ryan didn't flinch. "No, you did that when you called them monsters." For a moment, silence. The wind howled between them. Then the Emperor attacked. The ground exploded with light. Ryan dove aside, the sword slicing through stone like butter. He rolled and grabbed a fallen soldier's weapon, firing a burst of plasma that glanced off the Emperor's shield. The shockwave threw him backward, but he rose again, coughing smoke. "You think you can stand against me?" the Emperor thundered. "I don't need to," Ryan gasped. "I just need to make you see." They clashed again, energy against will. Every strike sent shockwaves through the valley. Lyra and her sisters watched from the cave, clutching their children, tears streaming down their faces. "Father, stop," Sarah cried, but he couldn't hear her or didn't want to. At last, the Emperor knocked Ryan to the ground. His sword hummed inches from the human's chest. "It ends now," he said coldly. "Your kind will never stain my family again." Ryan, bleeding and exhausted, met his gaze. "Then look behind you," he whispered. The Emperor turned. There, in the cave entrance, stood his daughters. No longer hiding, no longer afraid. Their faces glowed with the same light as their children, who now floated slightly above their mother's arms, surrounded by soft energy. The Emperor's eyes widened. "Impossible." Lyra stepped forward. "No, father. It's life." Mira's voice was firm. "You called us shame. But look what love created." Sarah, the youngest, held out her child toward him. "Your grandson, father, half you, half the man you wanted dead." The Emperor's sword fell from his hand. It clattered against the ground, echoing through the valley. He sank to his knees, trembling. The soldiers, seeing their Emperor kneel, lowered their weapons. The air became still again. Ryan pushed himself up, breathing hard, his hand bleeding but steady. The Emperor's voice cracked for the first time. All my life I feared weakness. I thought love was weakness. But this, he looked at the glowing children. This is stronger than my entire empire. Lyra's eyes softened. Then let that strength guide you now. He looked up at Ryan. Human. You changed everything. Ryan shook his head. They did. The Emperor rose slowly, facing his fleet. Stand down, he ordered. No one will harm them, not now. Not ever. The soldiers looked at each other, confused. But my Emperor, stand down, he roared, voice breaking with both fury and relief. The fleet turned away, engines dimming, lights fading into the dark sky. For a long moment, no one moved. The only sound was the soft cry of a child. Then something incredible happened. The Emperor stepped closer to his daughters. He touched Sarah's face gently, as if afraid she might vanish. You look like your mother, he whispered. And for the first time the mighty ruler of 1,000 worlds wept. Ryan stood beside them, silent. The war was over, not through blood but through understanding. The Emperor looked up at the stars. Perhaps this is what the universe was waiting for, he said quietly. A new beginning, Ryan nodded. A new dawn. As the camera would fade, the scene would show the moon bathed in light, ships leaving orbit. The Emperor embracing his grandchildren and Ryan standing with the sisters, looking toward the future. The wrath of a ruler had ended, and in its place something stronger had risen. The wrath of love. Peace rarely comes quietly in the galaxy. Even after the Star Emperor's wrath cooled and his daughters were spared, the echoes of the miracle spread across 1,000 worlds. Whispers of hybrid children, of a human who defied an empire, of love stronger than bloodlines. Some called it destiny, others called it blasphemy, and in the towering halls of the Galactic Senate, that argument would soon decide the fate of not only Ryan Hale and the Emperor's daughters, but the future of both species. The Senate was not a single room. It was a planet-sized arena, filled with light and power. Hundreds of alien delegates floated in their platforms, shimmering with energy and color. Some had scales, others metal skin, others minds that spoke without mouths. At the center stood the high podium where the Emperor once ruled unquestioned. Now he stood there again, but not as an untouchable god. He stood beside his daughters, their newborn children, and one human who had shaken the foundation of an empire. The crowd murmured, "Look at them. The human should be executed. The Emperor has lost his mind. They say the children glow like stars." The noise grew like a storm until the Chancellor of the Senate raised a silver staff. "Order! The trial will begin." Ryan stood silent, wearing simple gray robes. His face bore the marks of battle, but his eyes carried calm. The Emperor's daughters stood beside him, each holding a child wrapped in silver cloth. The Emperor himself, once the galaxy's most feared ruler, now stood one step behind them, not as a king, but as a father. The Chancellor's voice echoed through the chamber. "Commander Ryan Hale of Earth, you are accused of violating the law of purity, defiling the imperial bloodline and endangering galactic order through unnatural union." "How do you plead?" Ryan looked around at the endless crowd and said quietly but firmly, "I plead human." The words rippled through the Senate like a shockwave. "What does that mean?" The Chancellor snapped. Ryan lifted his chin. "It means I loved when I was told not to. I cared when I was supposed to stay silent. And I believed that what makes us alive isn't bloodlines or laws, it's compassion." Murmurs filled the chamber again. Some alien senators leaned forward, others hissed in anger. Then Lyra stepped forward, her voice calm but strong. "When my father hit us, no one questioned it. No one asked why his daughters had to live in darkness. You called us cursed," her tone sharpened. "But when love freed us, when kindness gave us light, you call that corruption? Tell me, which one sounds more like the crime?" The crowd went silent. Mira spoke next, her silver veil glimmering. "Science says we are impossible. But these children breathe, they cry. They live." She held her child high, his skin glowing faintly blue. "If nature allowed this, then maybe it's time your laws catch up to nature." A hush fell over the Senate. Then Sarah, the youngest, stepped forward with trembling hands. "I grew up thinking I was ugly. I believed it because you all did. But a human looked at me and saw beauty, not in my face but in my heart. Now I have a child who carries both worlds inside him. You can call that unnatural if you want. I call it hope." Her voice cracked at the end, but it was enough. Half the Senate was speechless. The other half burned with rage. The Chancellor slammed the staff. Enough emotion! The law is clear. Such unions are forbidden. These abominations cannot be allowed to live. The word abominations echoed like poison. The Emperor's golden eyes snapped open. Mind your words, he growled, his deep voice shaking the walls. Majesty, the Chancellor said coldly, you may rule stars, but here, we rule the laws of civilization. The Emperor stepped forward slowly, towering over him. For centuries I ruled through fear. And what did that give us? Empty worlds, silent daughters. Broken hearts, he turned, facing the galaxy. But this human did something no law ever could. He brought love to my bloodline. He healed what power could not. Gasps filled the air. The Emperor raised his hand, his voice booming across the chamber. If you call that a crime, then I am guilty too. Silence fell like a hammer. Ryan looked at him stunned. The Emperor's eyes were no longer cold. They were alive, Your Majesty. Ryan began softly. The Emperor nodded. You changed me, human. You changed my empire. The Senate will not destroy what the universe itself has blessed. The Chancellor's face twisted in fury. You would defy the Senate? The Emperor smiled faintly. I would defy the stars themselves for my children. Suddenly the lights dimmed. A sound, soft musical, filled the hall. The newborns, sensing the tension, began to glow. Their eyes opened, reflecting constellations inside them. The crowd gasped. The energy readings spiked on every device. They weren't just hybrids. They were something new. Pure harmony of two worlds, radiating calm that silenced the entire planet. Even the Chancellor fell to his knees, trembling. What are they? Ryan whispered. They're the future. The trial ended not with a verdict, but with awe. The Senate did not vote that day. No one dared. History recorded that the children's light lasted for 7 minutes, during which time every creature in the chamber felt peace. Real, wordless peace for the first time in their lives. When it was over, Ryan stood beside the Emperor on the balcony of the Senate Tower. The stars burned brighter that night. You realize, the Emperor said quietly, the galaxy will never be the same. Ryan nodded. That's the point, isn't it? The Emperor gave a faint, weary smile. Yes, the point of a miracle is to break the rules of the impossible. Behind them, the sisters laughed softly, their children glowing like small suns. And below, on every world, billions looked up to the stars and whispered one thought. Perhaps the human wasn't a curse, but a blessing. 100 worlds turned toward one star. The war fleets had gone silent. The Senate chambers stood empty. And for the first time in centuries, the Star Empire awoke not to the sound of orders, but to the sound of children's laughter echoing through the halls of power. The age of fear had ended, and the age of the new dawn had begun. It started with a sunrise. On the imperial homeworld, the twin suns rose together for the first time in living memory. The light spread across silver cities and crystal towers, washing away shadows that had clung to the empire for generations. At the palace balcony stood Emperor Varen, no longer wrapped in armor, no longer crowned in gold. He wore a simple white robe, his golden eyes soft with age and wonder. Beside him stood his daughters, Lyra, Mira, and Sarah, each carrying the glow of motherhood, each holding a child who now represented more than royal blood. And standing quietly beside them, half in shadow and half in sunlight, was the man who had changed everything, Commander Ryan Hale of Earth. The Emperor's voice carried across the balcony. For so long I believed strength was born from fear, he said. But a human taught me that strength is born from love, and love never kneels. Ryan smiled faintly, his hands clasped behind his back. I didn't come here to change your world, Your Majesty. I just wanted to save 3 souls who deserve to be free. The Emperor looked at him and for the first time bowed his head. And in doing so, you saved mine. The galaxy had changed since the trial of the Senate. The children, 3 luminous hybrids, had grown quickly. They learned faster than anyone expected, speaking both human and imperial languages before they could even walk. When they laughed, the air shimmered. When they cried, the stars flickered faintly in the night sky. Scholars called them starborn. Priests called them the bridge between species. To Ryan and the sisters, they were simply their children. The Senate that once demanded their death now sent ambassadors with gifts. The same alien species that mocked humans as primitive now asked for Earth's cooperation. For the first time in galactic history, a human embassy was built in the heart of the Empire. Flags of Earth and the Star Kingdom flew side by side, blue and silver, fluttering together in the solar wind. But peace didn't come without scars. Ryan still carried nightmares of the night he faced the Emperor's sword. Lyra often woke crying, haunted by the years they lived in darkness. Even the Emperor sometimes stood alone in the palace gardens, staring at the stars and whispering to ghosts of the past. Yet, they all endured. Because for every scar there was now a reason to heal. One evening, Ryan sat in the garden where he had first met the sisters. The same fountain still flowed, but now, instead of silence, it was filled with laughter. The children played around the glowing trees, one chasing lights, one drawing stars in the dirt, and the smallest sitting in Ryan's lap, tugging at his sleeve. "Daddy," the child said, "will the stars ever stop being angry?" Ryan smiled softly. "The stars aren't angry anymore. They were just waiting for us to listen." "Listen to what?" He pointed upward. "To each other." The child smiled as if understanding something far beyond their years. A few meters away, the Emperor watched them. Lyra joined him, her face calm. "He changed you," she said quietly. The Emperor nodded. "No, he reminded me what it meant to be alive." He looked at the children again. "Do you know what I see when I look at them?" "What?" she asked. "Not human." "Not alien. Just beginnings." Weeks later, the galaxy held its first day of unity. Across hundreds of planets, citizens lit twin lanterns, one blue for Earth, one gold for the Empire. Messages poured through hyperspace channels, not of war or trade, but of hope. Ryan stood with the sisters on the balcony as fireworks burst across the horizon. "I never thought I'd see this day," he said quietly. Mira laughed softly. "You made it happen." He shook his head. "No, we did." The Emperor raised a glass of glowing nectar. "To a future that belongs to all." And as the galaxy celebrated, the camera would fade upward, through clouds, through space, past the ships now carrying both human and alien crews side by side. In orbit, a new monument shone like a star, a great statue of two hands, one human, one alien, holding a small, glowing child between them. At its base were engraved words in two languages. "Love is not a weakness of flesh. It is the strength that builds worlds." Years passed. Legends were born. Children of the Starborn line grew into explorers, philosophers, and peacemakers. Some carried the Emperor's golden eyes, others, Ryan's human heart. And whenever someone asked how the Great Peace began, history would whisper one answer. It began with a man who refused to look away. A man who called monsters beautiful. A man who taught the galaxy that love is humanity's greatest weapon. The story ends in the quiet of night. Ryan walks into the garden one last time. Older now, his hair streaked with silver. The three sisters sit nearby, smiling as the starborn children chase fireflies of light. He looks up at the sky, thousands of stars burning bright, and whispers, "We made it." A gentle voice replies behind him, "It's Lyra." "No, Ryan," she says softly. "We became it." The stars shimmer brighter as if answering her words, and as the music swells, the screen fades to black with a single line. In the end, humanity did not conquer the stars. It loved them.